Okay, let's look at the Medicaid and how that works. So Medicaid is a federal program that helps pay for long-term care costs for people who can't afford to pay those costs themselves. And the public policy is they want to, when they have a couple, they want to allow the well spouse of the couple to retain as much as possible so that they don't become destitute themselves and having to spend down all the assets. And so what are you allowed to have? The spouse who is in care, the one who needs to qualify for Medicaid, is allowed to have no more than $2,000 in their account at the end of any month. And then the well spouse can have a house of any value and a car between $53,000 and $115,000. The difference, and this number goes up, is creeping up slowly with inflation. But the difference in the values is if you are new on the safari, you just had the medical event, and you're just entering into care, then the lower number applies. If you've been in care for a long time and you're just getting to a place for some reason now where you think it's appropriate to apply, then the larger number would apply. For my examples today, I'm going to just be using the lower number, $50,000, in my examples. Okay, and you're allowed to have prepaid funerals for both folks, burial plots, and a small life insurance policy and personal property of any value. Okay, and if your assets are under those amounts there, or an exempt asset like a house and a car, then you would financially be eligible for Medicaid. The person who needs care needs to be physically qualified for Medicaid. In order to qualify physically, you need to show that you need some assistance in at least 3 activities of daily living. So that would be toileting or showering or transferring yourself or dressing or eating or those kinds of things. Or you have a cognitive impairment where you don't remember, you need cues to take your medications or to eat your food or those kinds of things, and you would be eligible physically for the Medicaid program. So let's look at John and Mary. We had that example, right? So let's say something happens, they're in their assisted living, and John all of a sudden finds himself on the wagon to that place you don't want to go. And Mary comes to see me and says, well, John is now in rehab at the nursing home, and it doesn't look like he's going to be able to come home. So how are we going to afford to do this? And I go through this little scenario here, and she says, oh, it looks like we qualify. So I said, well, that's great. Let's fill out the application. So we're filling out the Medicaid application, and we come to the question that says, have you made any gifts or transfers in the last 5 years? And so she says, oh, well, yeah, 2 years ago when we moved into the assisted living place, in order to qualify John for veterans benefits, we gave the kids $250,000. And I said, oh, that's too bad, because the gift creates a period of ineligibility. And so John doesn't qualify because of the gift. However, there is a rule that says we can undo the disqualification if we just return the gift. Why you're laughing? Why are you laughing? So that's exactly right. So Mary calls the 3 kids and says, the attorney says we need to meet, and she meets with the 3 kids, and she says, you know, we gave you that money a couple years ago, and Dad's in the nursing home now, and in order to qualify for Medicaid, we need the money back. And so you have the dutiful daughter, right? And she reaches in her purse and pulls out her checkbook, and she writes the check for her third to Mom and Dad, and tears it off and gives it to Mom. And then you have son number 1, and son number 1 says, oh, Mom, we added on to the house, and we bought a new car, and we just don't have that money anymore to give you. And then they turn to son number 3, and he's kind of goes, whoa, Mom, you mean you gave us some money? I just got off the plane from Vegas, man. I don't remember any of that. Whoa. So could be a problem, right? So let's say they did it the right way. Instead of giving the money to the kids outright, they gave it to the kids, and the kids put it in a trust, and it's been sitting in the trust. Mom calls the kid, says, I need the money back. So then the daughter, who's the trustee of the trust, writes Mom a check. Mom has the money back now, but she's still over, right? She still has $300,000. So what can she do? Well, the way the rules work, Medicaid allows the well spouse to shelter all of the money above the maximum amount you're allowed to have. So Mary can take the $250,000 and buy a Medicaid qualified annuity to shelter that money. And so in order for an annuity to be Medicaid qualified, it has to meet certain requirements. So the way an annuity works is you put your money into it, into this investment. I don't sell them. This isn't the reason I got you here tonight, okay? So you put your money into the investment, and it pays you back your money every month in monthly payments with a little bit of interest, very little bit of interest. But it's a way to shelter the money. And in order for the annuity to be Medicaid qualified, it has to be irrevocable and non-transferable. So you can't put the money in, get the spouse qualified for Medicaid, and turn around to the company and say, thank you very much, give me my money back, okay? It's irrevocable and non-transferable. It has to be amortized over 5 years. So you put it in, and 5 years monthly payments, that's 60 equal payments. So the $250,000 is going to be reduced to payments that equal $50,000 a year. So that's what, about $3,500 a month, and for 60 months. And she's getting those payments every month. The well spouse gets to keep all the income that comes in their name. So the well spouse, if Mary has a Social Security and a pension, that she gets to keep that plus the annuity that's going to come in her name. And so John would then be eligible for Medicaid. And if John then dies in care, the state of Washington has the right to go against his assets. But we legitimately transfer. There's no penalty for transfer between husband and wife. It's not like a transfer to the kids or to charity or anything. So that's not a problem that we transferred all the assets from John to Mary. John dies in care. The state can come against John's assets for repayment of the value of the services they provided. But John doesn't have any assets. He gave them all to Mary. If Mary dies, and Mary died, let's say she died at the end of year 1. She's received $50,000. There's still $200,000 left in the annuity. When the annuity is written, it's written so that the state of Washington is the beneficiary of the assets in the annuity up to the value of services that John received at John's death. So what that means in English is, if Mary dies at the end of year 1, she's received $50,000. John's been in the nursing home for a year. Medicaid doesn't pay the full freight, the same as a private pay rate. So let's say they pay $60,000 a year for John's care. John's received $60,000 worth of care. There's $200,000 left in the annuity, so the state of Washington gets reimbursed $60,000 of the $200,000, and the $140,000 that's left goes to the kids, to the residual beneficiaries. Let's say Mary dies at the end of year 4. She's received $200,000 of the $250,000. There's $50,000 left in the annuity. John's received care for 4 years, so that at $60,000 a year, that's $240,000. There's only $50,000 left in the annuity. The state gets to $50,000, and that's all that the state gets. If Mary dies after year 5, the annuity is gone, and then there's no claim back by the state against the annuity. Okay, so that's how that works.
I have a question.
Yes?
If the well spouse is employed and the other spouse is in care, does the employment fall in that, the money they receive fall in that $53,000?
No, if they're employed, then that's just income. So that's down there. Yeah, so that's not included. Okay, what if you're a single person? How does that work? Well, again, you're limited to $2,000 in assets, and you can have a house and a car and a prepaid funeral and burial plots and a small life insurance policy and personal property. But when you die, any assets that you own are subject to the estate recovery for the services you receive. So this would be a person, single person, they work, they're retired, they're living in retirement in their house, and then the big invitation to the accidental safari comes, and the life changes instantly, and whatever savings they had is spent down quickly in the nursing home, and so they are now applying for Medicaid. So they may still own the house. Sometimes the kids come in and they want to try to save the house. They say, well, let's rent the house. Well, if you rent the house, Dad owns the house, and so the net income from the rental just gets added to Dad's income, and so all of the income that the person receiving Medicaid gets turned over towards their cost of care. It's called their participation. They get to keep $57 a month as a personal needs allowance. And so it really doesn't benefit Dad to rent the house, because any net rent goes towards the cost of care. And so what usually ends up happening is Dad's on Medicaid, the house goes up for sale, the house gets sold, and now Dad no longer has $2,000. He's got all the proceeds from the sale of the house. So he's off of Medicaid, and he private pays, spends it down, and then when that's all gone, he's back on Medicaid. If the house was sold and he was off Medicaid and then he passed away, then the state would just put a lien against, or a creditor's claim against his probate of his estate for reimbursement to be paid back. Let me say from experience that folks who are on Medicaid or folks that are private pay, you can walk down the hall at any of the nursing homes in our county and you can't tell who is private pay and who's Medicaid. We're very fortunate. I've been to some seminars with attorneys from other states, and they tell me, you know, you get off the elevator on the Medicaid floor and it knocks you over, the smell knocks you over. So we're very fortunate in that people who are able to qualify for Medicaid and have their costs of care paid by Medicaid do not get a lower level of care or different treatment than private pay people. So that's should not be a concern here in Washington.